Okay, do I have a motion to return to open session?
Second.
Ms. Franklin and Dr. Roundtree. Ms. Osborne, please call the roll.
Yes.
Yes.
Ms. Martin? Yes. Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
President Baker?
Motion carries. Do I have a motion to certify closed session that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which the certification applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Purcell and Dr. Roundtree. Ms. Osborne, please call the roll.
Ms. Vaughn?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin? Dr. Guthrie?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
President Baker?
Motion carries. Do I have a motion to long-term suspend student A?
Second.
Ms. Franklin and Dr. Guthrie. Any discussion? Ms. Osborne, please call the roll.
Ms. Vaughn?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin? Yes. Dr. Guthrie?
Yes.
Ms. Martin? Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree?
No.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
12 in favor, 2 opposed.
Motion carries. Do I have a motion to long-term suspend student B?
So moved.
Ms. Purcell and Ms. Franklin, any discussion? Ms. Osborne, please call the roll.
Ms. Vaughn?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin? Dr. Guthrie?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
President Baker?
Motion carries. All right, and that brings us to our business meeting with our budget update. Next, we'll have the 2025-26 budget update. Angie Bland, our Director of Finance, and Trevor Bennett, Budget and Finance Manager, will be available for questions. Was there anything that y'all wanted to start with to present any changes or anything, or is this just open question for them?
I was going to start with a few things. Tosh, could you go to the third thing down? Put that on the screen. Not on the slide, the third attachment. That's the one, yeah. So some of the guidance that I believe we got, and that's why we're here to talk about if I made a mistake or was in error, was get some more information on what some of the costs would be for some of the additional expenditures that the school board had requested of us. And Ms. Bland and Mr. Bennett did that work and got us the information. So if you look at that there, to do the salary scale adjustment, to take everyone down to the 15-step guide that we were proposing originally, and again, we don't have the guides for approval yet. If this budget does get approved, we'll give you the specificity with each guide, because obviously there's some compression there when you're going from 36 steps to 15 that the board would want to look at and approve. But the overall aggregate amounts to do everyone, or classified staff as well as our professional staff, that was added there. So that's the $520,000 in addition to, off the top of my head, I believe it was $495 or $450 or something like that for the professional staff. The Dean of Students position, there was some discussion on that, and what I heard from the school board, again, unless I got it wrong, was not only did people think we needed that position at Christiansburg Middle School, but it may also be needed at Blacksburg Middle School. So we found out what the cost would be for that position, and for 2 of those positions, it would come out to a total increase of $119,000. That's an increase because we already allocated 80% of one of those amounts for one position. Is that correct? No, I got that wrong. Help me out on that number. That's for the 2 positions, correct? Dean of Students? Yeah. We had a .8 and we got rid of it, so that's for if we wanted to include 2 positions for Dean of Students in the budget. And what I heard was one for Christiansburg Middle School and one for Blacksburg Middle School, if the board desires. There was an ask to get more nurses at our 2 biggest schools, instead of having 1 nurse to have the additional support in the building, and 2 additional nurses. Those costs are listed there as well. And the school board salary increases, as you can see there, it's a $43,000 approximately increase. And we talked a little bit about that, about policy that may need to be adjusted in order for us to move forward with that, but that was the amount we put forth. The biggest actually surprise for me was the free breakfast and lunch for all students. The number we looked at was about $2.5 million initially, and then when we delve deeper into that, that's the cost that is generated by our students and staff paying for things. But that overall number includes à la carte items, things that are not included in a lunch or a breakfast. So if you just focus on the lunch and the breakfast, that would bring that number down to 1.2 million approximately. So the total increase in what we asked, from what I had presented to all of you, is about $2 million. Tosh, could you go to the next one down? All right, so if you look at this, there's a couple of changes that I'd like to highlight, and then we'll open up for questions if y'all would permit me. This is the money slide, from the last presentation we did, where at the end we said, what's the aggregate number, what's the increases? And the increase there was, they asked for this, the county was 4.7 million approximately of an increase, accounting for a state aid increase, and that's what we would require from the county. If you can go to the next slide, Tosh. What's highlighted in yellow there are those increases that we talked about a few slides above on what I heard the board ask me to get the numbers for. But there's also additional number that's decreased. If you look at the operating revenue for the total state revenue, it came from 81 million and change to about 80 million and 400,000. And the reason is the calc formula came out the day after our meeting, and the state is projecting us to have lower enrollment than we had anticipated. We could argue that back and forth, and we may be a little higher, we may be a little lower. I think it's fiscally responsible to go with the number they projected, which I think is lower than what our number will be. So at the end of the year, we would have a little bit more as opposed to a little bit less. So the calc tool calculation for what the state predicts our enrollment will be for next year came out to $80,400,000 allotment of funds as opposed to the 81 million that we had anticipated before. So that brings the overall additional monies we would ask for the Board of Supervisors from the county to be 7.7 million. I'll open it up to questions, or do I need to add anything to that?
I have a question. On the free and reduced lunch, that's a wonderful idea. But I have concern with waste. And I will be right up over all my years of child rearing and on the board, I see a lot of waste. And so one of my questions is, do all of our students, do we have a number on how many students actually eat breakfast? And could we get a number on maybe instead of doing breakfast and lunch, just doing lunch? Just because of the fact that, sometimes if you can't do everything, maybe you can do the majority, because I feel like every student eats lunch, but I don't feel like, as a general rule, every student generally eats breakfast. And one of my concerns, and not saying that it's that big of a thing, but I have been there and I've seen whole trays go into the trash. So, and you can talk to our lunch ladies, and maybe more recent, that might not be happening, but I know of that to happen for a long time, and they were really concerned about seeing that. Especially students that come in, say, closer to 9:15, and then they're eating an early lunch at 11. A lot of the little guys aren't always hungry by then. My concern is they're eating breakfast, not eating lunch, then really hungry, and maybe going to homes that don't have, but so lunch to me is the key meal that we should, if we're going to concentrate on something, in my opinion, as a board member, that's what I would want to concentrate. So my questions are raised only due to those type things, not that it's not a great ideal, it really is, but how can we realistically look at it, and how can we make it suitable and fitting and not have waste? Because we do have a tremendous amount, and I can't support that. So how do we get those numbers? What do we need to do?
We can get you those exact numbers from Ms. Knott. She has that, and we can get you by school, and we can get you the average for the division. I don't know breakfast off the top of my head, but breakfast is lower participation than lunch. Lunch participation is about 50%. So we got 9,500 students, so you're looking at half of that, right? 4,750-ish a day for lunch. That's across the division. Some schools are more than others.
And I will also key, that's only if the rest of the board is interested in those numbers. I'm just, yeah, I'd be interested.
They're easy to get, Ms. Bond. I could get that and send an email to the full board. I'm sure Ms. Knotts could get that very quickly.
But it's a bit of an assumption, but I would assume that Sodexo manages how much they've produced for lunch and breakfast. And if 25% of our student body is eating breakfast on a normal basis, they may produce 27%, but they don't produce 50% of our student body in breakfast in order to serve only 25% that regularly eat.
Are you asking me that?
Huh?
Are you asking me that, or, yeah?
It's a bit of a statement, but
You're right. They're in business to make money, so they don't want to waste it. They don't want to produce more breakfasts or lunches than are actually taken, because that's how they get their compensation back. So whether that's from reimbursement from the state and federal government or from actually selling the lunch. So they do try to cut it tight, but, some days are better than others, right? Some lunches are more favorable than others, and, we have to provide a full lunch for kids, and kids don't always eat the apple, right, or the balanced piece, and that is what it is. I don't know
Right.
how we get around that.
yeah, I mean, that's what it is, no matter who's paying for it. The other thing, so that is breakfast and lunch. That's a 1 cent tax burden, $10 on a $100,000 house per year. Not much in the way of towards feeding our kids. The other thing is, if we get the numbers for breakfast and lunch, the state has bills in place for covering breakfast. So if those go through, then we wouldn't be covering the breakfast portion. We'd only be covering the lunch portion.
Or before we get too far down the road on this, we jumped in hot on this one.
sorry.
But let's put a little structure into what we're doing tonight, so we can
Okay.
give the administration some guidance, right? So we've got 5 different items that are in front of us for the consideration. So I'd like to give each one of these topics some time to talk, go around, provide inputs, and then let's give a thumbs up on each of them individually, so the administration knows whether we want to consider it or not. After we get through those 5, then we can go back to the bigger budget, and if anybody has any other items that they want to bring up, we can have that conversation too. But let's make sure we leave here tonight with clear guidance for our administration on these 5, a consensus from the board on each one, and any other topics. So they know what we want, and if there's any questions or asks of additional data, we can capture that as well. So we started at the bottom, and that's super cool. We can do that. It's fine.
I've been thinking about that all weekend.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
I'm
Yes,
sorry, I
ma'am.
had to get it out there.
You're good. So let's keep going around. So Ms. Parton, we're on lunch.
So,
Meals.
meals. So, great idea. I would love to see all of our kids have food if they're hungry and need it. I as well have a little bit of an issue with some of the waste that I've seen in the cafeteria. We've gone to eat lunches several times together through the years, and we've been, and I see it everywhere. I see it at elementary, middle, and high. So to think that there might be dollars going in the trash can, if there's a way we can maybe figure out with the food people what would be the best way to do this. I honestly still believe that should be being covered by our state, and maybe not so much by us, or maybe at least half, and we maybe kick in half for that as well. But I do think we need to have our administration at the schools emphasize the paperwork for the free lunch and for the people who can get that, and maybe try to talk people into looking into that and filling that sheet out. I don't understand why, if something is available to help you, why people wouldn't do it. I've heard things over the years, but at the same time, I would do whatever I needed to do to make sure my kid wasn't hungry. So just some things to think about, and that are on my mind for it as well. I don't want any of our kids to be hungry, but I do think we need to think about those few things as well.
Dr. Guthrie?
Okay, so, in favor, definitely in favor of including something in the budget for it. I think on the question of breakfast, lunch, I'm going to claim some ignorance here, in the sense that there may be children who are coming to school, and we have students who have some of them have quite late lunches, and so we could have students who are waiting a long time to eat. So for me, I mean, I would be interested in the difference between lunch and breakfast. It's not a make or break. So I'm just going to claim ignorance on what's more meaningful for our students who need to rely on this. I know, Dirk, you've done a little bit more research. If you've come across anything that makes an argument that it should be one versus the other, or both, or can you shed any light on this?
I mean, the only light that I would shed is that the House and Senate bills are going after breakfast. Breakfast is historically the most important meal of the day.
Right, yeah.
But that's all I got for
Yeah.
you.
And it's less expensive than
Yeah.
lunch. Are we going round? What are we doing?
Yeah, but I do know, like, what is the latest lunch period in our schools? Because some of them are later. I don't know if anybody can answer that question. Right, it's a large window. So that's one of my concerns, is if we have kids who are eating at 1:30 and they've not had anything all day. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Well, pushback on that is,
yeah.
if they're eating at 9, then how many, that's a really long time to not eat. So if you had to pick one or the other, and you chose breakfast, then they're not eating again till the next day, where at least lunch closes a little bit of that gap. So that's why I chose lunch. If we were going to try, if we were trying to get funding for at least one of them, is my point. It might be a better,
Dr. Guthrie, I'm sorry, can I pause you just 1 second? There's a slightly updated version that we needed to be looking at instead of the other one.
Oh, okay.
Can we highlight what the difference is here? Just so folks are aware.
Yes, the school nutrition is up a little bit. It's 1.25 million instead of 1.225.
The only other thing that I would add, if the bill is going through, I mean, one of us could call
Yeah.
Delegate Obenchain or find out what's the likelihood that it's going to pass, what's the support like, and if there is support and it looks like it might pass or is going to pass, then we could just do lunch. So I'm open to more information, but I certainly am in favor of the proposal.
Thank you. Ms. Franklin?
So I'm in favor of feeding both meals because there are children who may only have had lunch when they left school, and they're hungry when they get there. They need breakfast. And the other arguments that you all have made about those timelines. But if we're going to feed them, we need to feed them. So I'm in favor of trying to get the money for both.
Ms. Rousseau?
I'm in support of free meals for students.
Okay. Okay, yeah, thank you. So I guess I would just ask the question, and apologies if this was already mentioned, but the number that's presented, is that a number, what is that number based on? Let me just ask that question.
We actually went back to school nutrition, and Michelle Knotts was able to help us. We went back for several months and calculated the rates each month for that, did a comparison like year by year, and this is a really good figure. We had to take out, when we initially looked at the 2.5, we were looking at everything. We were looking at a la carte, we were looking at adult meals, in addition to all of grant reimbursements, things of that nature, additional monies, any donations, all of that went into the 2.5. So we watched that and sat with her and did an analysis of it, and we were able to come up with a good rate on that.
So I just want to be clear. So this number that you're presenting is based on actual usage of our cafeteria food right now. This isn't necessarily feeding everybody.
It actually, there is a 5% increase included in that number to allow for that. We do not know what the increase would be based on doing that. We put that out there. It may be higher based on that. We would have to look at why, students are not eating the lunches. Certainly, that's going to be an attraction if it's a free, a free meal to students, that there will be some, but there may be other reasons that they're not.
Question too, on the breakfast, is it a grab-and-go breakfast, or is it a breakfast? So the grab-and-go is basically, yeah, it's fruits and yogurts and things like that, am I correct? By thinking that, it's not like it's bacon and eggs and,
Depends on the school.
okay?
Like I was at Christiansburg High School this morning for breakfast, and breakfast was served in the line. Kids went up and got it. I didn't actually look at what the particulars were. But the elementaries are more of a grab and go. Unless they get there earlier, they go and eat it in the classroom.
I guess the rationale for my question is, and I'm sure this isn't going to be a surprise to you, but I got to imagine this is a pretty hard thing to predict, right? Because how many students aren't eating because they just don't like the food and they prefer to bring their own? My kid falls in that category, and whether it's free or not, he ain't gonna eat it, right? And that's fine. But how many kids might change their preferences if it were free, right? So how do you predict that?
I think we have that information, or at least Mrs. Knotts has a pretty rough idea, because we have community eligible program for 6 schools where it's totally free for breakfast and lunch, and it's not 100% participation. So we have, I think, a fairly good idea on what that would be and the percentages she used to calculate this. This was what if you remember, this was the SMP budget, right? So working with Sodexo and our own people, we anticipated to make that budget $6.5 million, whatever the actual number was, I forget off the top of my head. That was what we anticipated would be the payment portion for the adults, the a la cartes, and for the meals. And when they broke it down, as Ms. Bland said, that was the actual cost we predicted for the cost of the student breakfasts and student lunches that are paid for now. I think it's a pretty good, but it's a ballpark, yeah.
And the original number in the budget had an increase already of 5%, because that's what is expected each year. That's what Sodexo, that's their guarantee, is the 5%. So we consider that when we're considering their total revenues. So overall, it would be 10% overall increase if you looked at that.
Board, we can go back around. Are there any other outstanding questions? Okay. So based on what we have in front of us on that number, on that line item, we want to give a thumbs up or thumbs down for including this in the budget ask? And how many thumbs up do we have? Oh. Okay, great. Okay. So there's one for you. Let's jump back up at the salary scale. Any discussion on that one? Anybody want to start?
Not all of our employees are on salary scales. They get paid by the hour, and their salary scales are different than what we typically think of salary scales, the teachers, administrators. So how does that affect those folks? Because these are typically the ones who need the money the most. Well, they all need the money, but or have lower wages.
Yes, so we have factored in a 3% raise for part-time wages, just to kind of have a cushion for those salary increases. This salary scales adjustment number is just all full-time salary employees. So those part-time hourly employees would be accounted for in that 3% number that we added to part-time wages.
So, again, this is not just talking about part-time. We're talking about different areas in the district. They have different scales that may not be even up to 15. So if we're saying we're reducing everybody's to 15, that's not accurate.
I think almost, again, I don't know them all because there's hundreds of actual individual guides, and I know, Mr. Bennett, you guys went through that to get what the numbers would be. But this covers all our classified staff, our maintenance, custodial, support staff, almost everyone, and most of the guides were in the 35, 36 range. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. They all have more than 15 steps, all the salary guides.
So they all have more than 15?
So what that does is help to get folks up to their highest pay quicker. But I'm still concerned about the folks who may not be on scales, and they're only going to get the 3% raise.
Would that only be our part-time employees? Because everyone else is on a salary guide, even though they get paid hourly. Is that accurate?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Pull that mic in for us
Can we
when
see
you're
that?
talking. These things aren't
Can you
very-
hear me?
There you go. Thank you.
Yeah, that's correct.
'Cause I believe in, what, April or so, we see all the scales, because we get ready to do contracts. So I would like to see what all the scales look like to make sure that all of our employees are going to get compensated at the same level. Because this just doesn't sound right to me.
We could share that tomorrow. I mean, the salary guides are on the website, aren't they? I mean, we can get you that information.
So even people like maintenance workers, our groundskeepers and all that, they're all on scale and will remain. So that will also increase theirs. That's what you're saying.
Yes, that's correct.
I just want to see how much. If my top scale is only 17, 18, even 20, versus our teachers and administrators that are like, what, 30-some? There's a big difference in how much that's going to actually help things. 3% is really nothing, but anyway, I'll leave that alone for right now. Well, the people that I'm concerned about all, right? But the folks who are making the less, that we typically have to go back and figure out what we need to do to get them to come to work for us, and it's give them more money. And then we're constantly readjusting. Let's just pay them, and let's be done with it.
Dr. Guthrie?
I've heard from the MCA that they're in favor, and I've heard from different voices that they're in favor. I think to Penny's question that it's, this is so relative that it's hard to judge the effect if we implement this. So, for instance, okay, so it says all other. So it says all other, the salary scales adjustment, all other staff. So why does it say all other staff? I'm just trying to maybe close the gap a little bit here.
I believe because we're referring to all the other staff. I don't know what your question is.
No, so the scale, the 15, that cover, so what categories does that cover?
The one we're doing now or the professional staff? We have about, correct me if I'm wrong, 300 salary guides covering every different capacity, like a nurse, a speech therapist, a school counselor, a teacher, an administrator, and they often have 36 steps or more.
Right.
So the initial proposal was to do the professional staff, because that's our largest number, right? We got 900 and something teachers. So that was the bigger number. And then when y'all talked and we thought about, let's do all the what's called classified staff, which is everyone that doesn't have a professional certificate. That's everyone. That's bus drivers, custodians,
Right.
maintenance. As Ms. Franklin said, I'm not sure that it's the part-timers because they don't have a guide. They get a part-time hourly rate. That's just the part-time rate.
Right.
So it covers, correct me if I'm wrong, because you crunched all the numbers. It's all of the people that get a paycheck, the 1,670 people that we pay on a regular basis would be covered under this guide compression to be a maximum of 15. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, that helps some. 'Cause the reason I ask is if we're reducing the scale for different types of staff, is it possible that it could have the effect where somebody on one scale sees a significant benefit, where somebody in a different category sees less of a benefit? So there's a differential across employees, even though you're reducing multiple scales to fewer steps. That's part of what I'm asking.
That would be yes. That has to happen in order to compress the steps. There will be some people, the minimum would be 3%, which is the raise guaranteed for everyone. Some will get more.
So what's the differential? What could be the potential differential between the lower end and the upper end? So could it be 3% for somebody, but then 10% for another employee?
I can get you that exact number, because we worked on rough guides, with some of the MCEA staff, because my concern would be there would be people that would be complaining, right?
Right.
I'm Bernie Bragg, and I've been here 35 years. It took me 35 years to get to 75,000. How dare you get there in 15? Right? I could see that. I don't think it's fair, but I get it, right? So one of the things we try to do is how do we make it the most equitable? So when you're going from 36 to 15, there has to be some compression steps.
Right.
So for the first year out of that contract, it would be, maybe Derek has 12 years and Bernie has 16, and we're all on step 7. That will happen. But the idea was to make sure that whatever it is, we both got a raise that was fair-ish, right? So some would be a little more than 3%.
Okay.
But we can get that. We didn't bring the actual guide, because if you all don't approve the aggregate, there will be no increase in guide.
Right, right. So, right, there are going to be people who complain, but if you can say, okay, so we're talking about a difference between 3 and 5%.
Fair enough. I can get that.
Then it could allay some of the concerns.
We can get that.
Yeah. So I don't know if that helps at all, but, yeah. So I'm in favor, because I've heard the MCA and other people who are in favor, and other districts have far fewer steps as well.
And Dr. Gitschke, thanks for helping to clarify, and just to put this into context, right? Because if you look in the main budget, there was already in there for the salary steps for the teachers and some of the staff. This was meant to all other, right? So that's what that all meant. I wasn't sure myself, so I'm glad you clarified that. That's good. What are we doing? Ms. Bond?
I think you're on that side, aren't you?
You know.
Okay, go ahead.
Ms. Purcell?
Just to echo what's already been said, this will help with recruitment and retention, as I understand it, so I'm in support of it.
Dr. Roundtree?
So for the 15 steps, do you increase a step every year, or are the steps every 2 years? What's the rate of increase?
It's a great question. I would envision that they go up a step every year, and we did a rough projection on what next year's increase would be, so we have to know, right, as we move forward, if all of a sudden next year a 3% raise is $10 million, this wasn't a wise thing for us to do. So that would be the expectation moving forward, that we keep it at 15 and everyone progresses up 1 step a year. Now, that's contingent on the school board, though, on the budget, because if we budget a 0 raise, that may be hard for us to pay for all that, right? And if there is a raise, how does that impact the steps? Sometimes people add steps, sometimes they add it to the guide. The expectation would be moving forward that we keep that 15-step guide, and when there's a raise, we distribute it equally across the guide, because then, let's say, Dr. Gitschke's on step 2, and then next year he goes to 3. Well, he's getting a raise anyway, and if we get a 3% raise, he would get a little bit more, if that makes sense. So we would like to keep it, but that's really contingent upon state funds and, the school board budget on an annual basis. That's how we got to this, where it was now. Raises were taking place, and every year, all the guides, and I'd love to have an opportunity to share it. I don't want to waste people's time, but it's a monumental event. All these guides, every year they change, because we get a raise, and you want to try to spread it out equally. So you've added steps over time that have gotten us to 36 steps to get to the max. I hope I answered that.
Yeah, no. All right, yeah, I'm in favor of reducing the steps to 15 as well.
Ms. Pardon?
So I am in favor of that, especially making sure that all of our other staff is brought up to where they need to be. And it's, aside from what Dr. Bragan mentioned, not only is it going to depend on what the state says they're going to give teachers, and we have to match it to get it, but it's going to be dependent upon what we get from the Board of Supervisors. And we never know year from year what that might be. So we just kind of need to keep those things in the back of our mind, and we need to remember we're going to always want to do this, so we want to be able to continue to do it. So as we continue to grow, We don't want to get to a point to where we're going to say, we'd like to, but we really can't afford to give you a raise. So those are just things to think about. I am in favor of the steps. I'm sure there's some people that need to be brought up to where they need to be that have been here for a while. And I do think, seeing as how we're always looking for employees and needing more help, that the raise for the other staff will be most beneficial. And I hope we can possibly do something to continue getting those people where they need to be, and so they'll stay with us.
Ms. Bowen?
Okay, so I'm wondering, going back to because my concerns too are, and that's how we got partly with the steps we're at, is because fighting for those people that didn't get but 25 cents or 30 cents on an hour, opposed to someone making 60 or 70,000 a year. They're getting a nice little raise, but you get people that were making $12, $15 an hour, they're not seeing so much of it. But throughout the years, when we've needed to give those raises, we have said, okay, we've got to beef this certain group up. So I'm hoping that just because we're doing this, we still will be able to do that if we deem it possible. Am I correct by thinking that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So based on everything I'm hearing, I don't have any further questions. It sounds like just in the updates, everybody here was in favor of that, so.
Percent for all staff in steps is not the same. Or the 15 steps reduction.
So it sounds like the majority of the board was okay with it, but we should definitely get with that information. I think that would certainly help prior to approving the budget itself.
I could email all the salary guides now. It's on our website. I'll email the link to the board now.
That's the current salary guides or the
Current,
proposed salary guides?
current. We didn't do the proposed ones because we got to get the budget first.
And I think Ms. Franklin's interested in seeing the
The proposed ones,
proposed.
Yeah, because I want to know how that plays out.
get those two. I don't have those readily available.
Can I just add to that? So you could send us the guide, but if you are able to answer that question of how to compare the guides or analyze across to look at that potential differential, how large or how small could it be for our employees? I think that would be helpful, because if you just give us the guide, we're not going to know how to interpret it very easily. But if you were able to do a little bit of synthesis there, that would be super helpful.
Okay, great. So next up is the Dean of Students. Now, I've still got the old copy up. And so that one had a much higher number than the one that's up here. Can you clarify that?
Yes, we were going to do a clarification on that. So the cost here that you're seeing is to bring the positions to 2 full-time FTEs. The .8 was already included as part of the original part of the budget. So this is to bring that to 2 full-time positions and benefits.
Okay, that helps. All right, board, who wants to start on this one? Okay, thanks.
So, I think everybody knows I've had some questions about the Dean of Students. I've heard there's some good things happening, right? But for the things that a Dean of Student is doing, Dean of Students, our administrators and counselors, I believe, because they were doing this, and they're doing this in other buildings. It's part of the job. We have an issue when it comes to when we send our students out of school for 10 days, they are not getting support. And I would rather see those funds put into a program so that our students who are going out of school are going to get support to help make sure they're going to stay on track or get some education and not just kind of left at will, because that's not how it was before. When the alternative programs were put in place, that was the initial group that was targeted. And now they're just, you're on your own. And we need to do something about that. And I believe what we want to see from deans of students, and then it would just be in 2 buildings. If I'm a principal in another building, I'm like, where's mine? And I don't care how many students I have, where's mine? Where this could help students across the district if we're doing something to help students who are out of school because it's across the district. It's just wrong that we're sending kids out with no resources. And we need to fill that gap. So I'm no on that.
Okay. Dr. Roundtree. Let's pick in any order tonight, it's fine.
Okay, so I'd like some information on what Ms. Franklin brings up. And the key number here is, on any given day, how many students are out on a suspension that is longer than, let's say, 2 days? So they're out for 3 days, they should be getting some kind of services. 2 days, maybe we just say that that's a short-term thing. Everybody that goes out, they're out on their own for 2 days, and then we bring them back into the alternative school. So at any time, a 10-day suspension is at most a 2-day loss of in-classroom education. They go to Montgomery Central for the other 8 days. Now, I see that a dean of students at these larger schools might be able to help facilitate that as well and organize getting those students the appropriate transportations, all the paperwork done to get them over to Montgomery Central for those days of education that they're on suspension. So yeah, I'm currently undecided. I'd like to hear a little bit more going around the room. And also, if you happen to have those numbers available, I think I'd be surprised if you have them available tonight, but maybe you do.
I don't say, I can't pull that out of the air, and I don't have those exact numbers, but I could say this, that after a conversation at a meeting or 2 ago, Mr. Howard and myself were looking at options, exactly what you and Ms. Franklin had expressed for services to be provided for kids that we were thinking 4 days or more. We'll have to look at that because logistically it's hard to do it in a quick turnaround. But I could safely say that we're going to explore doing that regardless of whether we have a dean of students or not, and incorporate that in part of what we're trying to do at Mont Central. We have to look at the logistics and what that would look like. But Mr. Howard, that's one of the charges he's working on right now, regardless.
Ms. Purcell?
Yeah, so as I've always understood it, the dean of students position was created to triage a particular problem at a particular school and was always meant to be short-term, which is why it fell off the budget for this year. And what I asked the last time, when now it's coming up as this line item, is what's the discipline data? What are the administrators dealing with at the 2 biggest middle schools in our district? And is there enough administrator support to handle it, or does there need to be an additional position? So I need that information before I can say yes or no.
Dr. Guthrie?
Okay, so at Blacksburg Middle School, how many APs do we have? We have 2. And so the AP for 8th grade is the principal, correct?
I don't know how they're differentiated and who's assigned to what grade. That's up to the building level. If they
Yeah.
want to go alphabet, they want to go grade level, however they choose to do that.
Okay. Is there any reason why there isn't an AP for every grade, for instance, in the middle school?
Yeah, it's not needed. It's not, and the dean of students isn't needed either. That's my position. That's why I didn't put it in the budget. As Ms. Purcell had said, it was a temporary fix for a problem that now, as it's been 2 years in, should be addressed by the current administrators that we have there with the principal and assistant principals. I'll get the discipline data. My apologies for not getting that earlier, the numbers. But, and as Ms. Franklin said, if you do this for these 2 schools, well, we have other bigger schools. Why don't they have deans of students? And that's a slippery slope. I think part of the job as an assistant principal is to manage discipline as well as all the other things that go in the building. It's not an easy job. And the principal's job is to manage the assistant principals and determine, well, do I need one by grade level? Do I need one that's split where we split the grade levels? Do we do it by alphabet so I have the same kids over different years? That's a leadership philosophy that is a building level issue.
Yeah. Thank you. So part of the reason I asked that question is if you've got a dean of students who's doing some of the responsibilities that you would expect from say an AP, but that AP is doing a ton of work and looking over that dean of students and like, they get it pretty easy. Now, I'm not saying that's what's going on in the scenario we have now, but we're looking at hiring SSOs who are going to be providing additional support. I know that we have to approve and we have to go through that. What's that? Well, okay, so I was looking at what an SSO does. Part of it is to maintain discipline, et cetera, and the dean of student. Okay, so let's put that aside for just a moment. Okay, thank you. So I still have lots of questions about this, so I am not in favor. I know we've gotten letters and correspondence of people speaking very highly of having a dean of students. I don't feel like I have enough context for those letters to know, what's happening in that situation. And I have the same questions about if we put it in a couple of schools, what are the other schools going to say? And we're creating two different types of positions that could be in conflict or, I have too many questions to support at this time.
Just on the discipline data, I'm sorry.
No, please.
One of the goals that you all gave me was to do a presentation around the February 1st mark about student achievement and discipline, and we're planning on doing that for the February 4th meeting. At least one. We'll talk about the agenda prep on the timeliness and when we could squeeze those in. But part of that would share all the discipline data for the first 2 quarters for all of our schools and give you some of that specificity of information that may be helpful. I could share those documents ahead of time so you could kind of digest them maybe earlier than later and then come with questions when we do that presentation, because I think that will help you see where the trends are and which buildings and which ones are going down, going up, and who's impacted. So that was part of what our plan was initially to do, and I think you gave me the charge February 1st, so we figured the February 4th meeting or so.
Okay, great. Ms. Vaughn.
Okay, so I'm trying to get my thoughts together. No, I'm just trying to figure out how to say them the right way. I understand it was a temporary position, and I completely understand that principals and counselors have a role. But I think our students deal with a whole lot of different things than what they did 10 years ago. Social media, and there's a lot of things that don't fit into maybe bullying, and a lot of things that don't fit into our hate speech policy, but they're still very hurtful to students. And I have found that out in the last few days. So it's really opened my eyes on some things that can happen, and students can be devastated. So in my eyes, that's where a dean of students, and if I could have them in all the bigger schools, I would, because we can't have too much. Principals have their hands full. Counselors have their hands full. And they'll tell you that straight up. So, and I don't understand why maybe we couldn't incorporate in that job description some of the things we're talking about with students that are out for long-term suspension and helping get their work, helping maintain the things they need to do. I don't understand why we couldn't do that in the same representation there, covering both stones. But like I said, I can't help but think, and we constantly talk about our middle school ages are the hardest. They're middle. They're not big and they're not little. And they, I mean, they struggle. They need help. We've got so many parents that don't know how. and they turn, or just don't. And I just, like I said, I've kind of had my eyes open to situations that are happening to students that a dean of students maybe could, if directed into those type areas, take note, more than maybe a principal, an assistant principal, or a counselor. So my vote is to keep them there, and if we could add to the others, then so be it, but.
Ms. Pardon?
Okay, so I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. I am all for this position for many reasons. I'm glad to see that there's been another one added. Just because we are spending a whole lot of time doing what we did before this meeting. And the way I feel about it is that Dean of Students, you know, with the main word being students, students is why we're here, and students should be our main focus. And everything else is very important, don't get me wrong, but I have seen students who maybe not feel comfortable going to either a counselor or a principal, but going to someone else, they use the SROs, so to speak. I have heard stories from, and I'm just going to use Christiansburg Middle School because right now that's where we've got one, and I'm not going to lie, I'm concerned about that school. I don't want to see that school falling back. I'm concerned because we've got all the stability that's in that school right now. One of the main ones is getting ready to retire. We still have a lot of issues there, and we are continuing to get a lot of issues daily at all of our schools, unfortunately. And as to what Ms. Purcell was saying about a triage, and I agree with what Ms. Franklin says as well, about we need to make sure that our students have what they need if we have to discipline. But my whole point of having a dean of students is I don't want that person sitting in front of me to begin with, and hopefully that person can keep that from happening. Let's hope. Or we have someone else in there doing that. I think some of these principals and vice principals feel overwhelmed. I think it's different from school to school. And, you know, here, just as an example, and I'm not saying anybody's not doing their job, but if we've got 2 vice principals and a principal at a middle school, why are we still having so much of an issue? Are we just not holding our administration accountable, or do they really actually need more help? And that's what I would like to know. I would like to find out, you know, are you put to your wits' end with what your responsibilities are now, and you need the help? And every school's discipline is different. So even if we had to, if we could only do 2 now, let's say we get one school under control and maybe another school starts having issues. Why can't we just rotate them? Why can't we move them to where we're having issues and see if we can get things straightened out? Just a thought, there may be a reason we can't. And Ms. Bland, correct me if I'm wrong, you were not here when we did hire the first dean of students. But I want to say, I keep thinking back that one of the main reasons that the board agreed to do it was because we had someone who had worked in the schools before, because I can hear Dr. Meyer saying it to us now. And was it because we were able to get that position, and at the price, so to speak, or the salary we got them at, is because is that position not getting benefits? Am I right thinking that? Or are we doing something different with that position to where we're not paying as much as we would a regular employee?
That is correct. That position has no benefits.
It has no
It's a
benefits.
position without benefits.
So that would make it an even, so which one of our salaries, or of our employees have no benefits?
No, the only reason it doesn't have benefits is because the status of the person who was in it, not if
But
we
what
would
I'm.
have to pay.
Right, which brings me to, if we can find somebody who has retired that might be interested in doing that, that would be a possibility of something that would lower that salary, and it would not be so costly to us as well. Just a thought.
I would kind of think maybe I'd be discriminated against if that's all you were doing and I applied for the job.
Sorry, what?
I might look at that as discrimination if I was applying for the job, and,
Because no
oh,
benefits?
you're gonna get it because.
Is that what you're saying?
No, because you're looking for someone who you don't have to pay benefits.
No, I'm just saying, if we could find somebody that was interested and they got hired because they were the best person that we felt we needed to hire for the job. I'm not saying let's just look at those people. I'm just saying that was just an added bonus because they had already been here. And they were already familiar with our policies and our students and that type of thing. So
Right,
that's the
because
only
they were
reason I
the
made that comment.
Director of Secondary Education. And those funds came from ESSER funds for the first year, so we didn't pay anything, and then it got rolled into the budget.
So a lot of good discussion on this one tonight. I guess my question, kind of similar to Ms. Parton's, I guess, is, are the two buildings in question asking for this position, particularly BMS, where this would be a new position?
I believe so.
So they'd like to have it? Okay.
I didn't ask everyone, hey, would you like a dean of students? But I did hear a request from BMS and from CMS to continue it. Again, my position, and I work for all of you, I presented the budget, I think, for what we need. I don't think we need it. I think that's part of the administrator's job. And I understand all the discussion, and whatever y'all choose is what we'll go with. But as Ms. Franklin said, and Ms. Parton, the current position was created due to a retirement. It was kind of, we created it with that person in mind when they would retire. And I may be using the wrong acronym, but I think it's SLURB. I don't really know what that stands for, but as a retired employee, they get about 80% of what the salary would be. And we don't pay benefits or VRS because they're already collecting their retirement. So that's why that position at the time, and it was ESSER's funded as well. So that was last year when it came up in front of the school board, we had to talk about it because it was in addition to the budget.
So I just want to clarify, so if we opt to not support this one, do we need to go back to the current budget and take a look at the position, the .8 position that's already there? Was that in your original budget? I have to go look.
It wasn't. The calculation, though, it's in this number here. So if you all vote no, that no amount would be funded for the Dean of Students. If you vote yes, we would fund the full amount to cover two positions. And I would vote that we fund them for employee positions, not retiree positions, because you don't know that you would have retirees interested.
Okay. Okay.
Follow-up.
If we were to fund it, the increase to the budget that we saw last time would not be this 119, it'd be the 194, because that .8 was not in the previous budget.
Correct.
This is an increase to this current year's budget.
Correct.
And another question, what are the student populations for the 4 middle
Well,
schools that we have in the county?
That's what I was getting ready to ask.
I know you sent it to me in an email once, I was trying to look for the email, but.
Because isn't, like.
Give me a
BMS
second. I'll look it up. Off the top of my head, I don't know exactly. I'll give you exactly.
And with that information, also the principal and assistant principals that are in each building, because I think like Eastern
There's-
Montgomery Middle School has 100 and. Right, but I was going to say Eastern Middle School, looking at middle school, but they have a principal and an assistant principal, right?
Right.
And they have 200 students.
Charlottesville Middle.
Charlottesville, right. So it's kind of like apples and oranges, I guess is my point, where you've got 2 middle schools that have close to 900 students in them,
The numbers as of the end of December,
Sorry?
but just one.
Auburn Middle School, 307 students. Blacksburg Middle School, 966 students.
That's crazy.
Christiansburg Middle School, 771. Charlottesville Middle, 191. That's as of December 20th.
Charlottesville Middle School was,
High schools?
Sorry, just to go with those numbers, can you also mention how many APs are in each one of those schools?
so it's 2 at Christiansburg, 2 at Blacksburg, and 1 at the other 2.
That would be correct.
Is that right? Okay.
I just looked it up, so it's.
I think Ms. Franklin asked for the high school numbers. Again, this is as of December 20th. Auburn High School, 392 students. Blacksburg High School, 1,334
Now.
students. Christiansburg High School, 1,054, and Eastern Montgomery High School, 247.
But
That one I don't have off the
So
top of my head.
APs at Auburn High School is 1, Eastern Montgomery High School is 1, Christiansburg High School is 3, and Blacksburg High School is 3.
So they've got the principal status in the bigger high schools to offset the student base. Because they've got a principal and 3, but the middle schoolers have almost the same amount as high school students, and they've got 2 assistant principals.
Yes, so that was part of my question in the beginning about the APs, why we only have 2. Because I like to close the gap a little bit here, because you've said that you don't think that we need these positions, but you just said that our principal at BMS really wants someone that would like to have a dean of students.
They requested a dean of students, yeah.
Yeah. It makes more sense to me if they need additional support to have an AP in that position rather than have parallel structures of 2 APs and a dean of students. I would be more comfortable with that because that's within our organizational chart chain of command. That makes more sense to me because I want to be responsive if we have our middle schools, because we got all those emails, and if they're asking for additional support and looking at the numbers, the student numbers, if we've got 3 APs for comparable numbers, why would we not have comparable number of APs for the middle school?
I totally understand, and I work for all you. I would argue those numbers aren't comparable. 966 compared to 1,334, that's not comparable to me. 771 to 1,054, that's not comparable either. Again, I come from a different place, a different era, where as an AP, you had 750 students under your charge. I don't want to take away, the job is hard, kids are different now, and it's harder than it's ever been, I understand it. But at some point, I don't know how much we can keep giving, but that's up to y'all. You tell me what to do, and I'll put it in. I put forth what I think we need.
Okay, board, so let's get to a resolution on this particular ask. And if we want to consider a different ask, we could consider that. Is there any more discussion on the Dean of Students position before we get a thumbs up? Okay, sorry.
Just one comment to that, 2 dean of students is 100,000 compared to 2 assistant principals is a much higher. So that also was part of my decision-making.
That's only 1.2 of a dean of students. You have to multiply out
Hold on.
the additional 0.8. It's 194,000.
Can we get some clarification? Because I've heard 2 different things here.
Get their full number.
So which one is the right numbers?
The 194 is the correct number for 2 dean of students if you take out the .8.
Okay, so the 2 full amounts for 2 Dean of Students, 194.
Correct.
And do we have any sense comparable for 2 APs? Higher, lower, close?
Might be slightly higher, but about the same.
The full-time salary for that position is about the same. As I said, the person that was currently doing is at 80% of it.
Roger.
So we roughed out what that would cost at approximately an assistant principal salary.
So, again, I'm not in favor of those positions. And Dr. Reagan, you and I agree with this as far as folks being able to handle what they should be able to handle. And if not, then we need to put some things in place to help them with that. But again, just keep throwing people and money at things instead of correcting what we need to correct is not a solution.
Okay, board, let's get a thumbs up, thumbs down on the 2 Deans of Students positions so we can move on. So how many thumbs up for adding those 2 positions in the current budget? Okay. So I see 3 up and 4 down. Is that correct? Okay. All right, let's move. I'm eating my fruit. There you do it. Let's move on to our next one. So, crap, I lost the thing. So 2 nurses. So that was the addition of 2 nurses in our 2 bigger high schools. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
All right, any conversation on this one?
I guess I'll start since I'm the one that brought it up, and what I said when I mentioned it the first time was, do the student populations based on, ratio of student to nurse, demand 2 nurses at our 2 bigger high schools, and also what number of visits are the nurses seeing? So I asked for more information then. I still don't have that, and I would like more information still.
We can get that.
Yeah, right.
It's my fault. I apologize, Ms. Purcell. But in talking with our lead nurse and asking that question, do you think the 2 high schools, because of the number of students they serve and the number of staff they serve too, because they are the medical professional for staff as well, they thought that would ease the burden if we could do it at Christiansburg High School and Blacksburg High School. But I will ask them to give me the exact number of visits that occur on a regular basis there, because they do keep track of that, our school nurses.
Dr. Guthrie?
I do remember and ask when we had the employee groups come up for more support in this area. So it would be great to see that information, but I'm supportive.
Ms. Franklin?
How can you say no to nurses, right? But I too would like to see the numbers, and I would like to see the numbers for the middle schools also, because there could be more visits, quite frankly, in Eastern Montgomery than Blacksburg High School, just depending on what's going on in the communities.
Dr. Roundtree?
Yeah, I'd like to see those numbers too. Also, with these 2 nurses being at the larger high schools that, of course, they all have 1 middle school feeding into them, but they have a substantial number of elementary schools feeding into them. Do we have any issues with staffing substitute nurses? And if so, could we utilize one of those extra nurses as a floating nurse in the case that we do not have a substitute for one of the elementary schools and the feeder schools to those high schools?
Yeah, I think we never have enough substitute nurses because they're just hard to come by. But we do have floater nurse now that covers, and we do have people cover when they need to. So that's definitely an option that we can do in both of those areas. If we have 2 nurses and there's an absentees and that we can't get someone covered, at least to go over during the lunch times and other times when it's high volume, we could definitely do that. They do that now when we triage kind of stuff with our head nurse is based out of Montgomery Central, and that's typically smaller, so sometimes he'll fill in and help other people out. And we do have a floater nurse that's typically unassigned unless there's an emergency or something occurs.
All right, sounds good. Thanks.
Ms. Parton? Did I get everybody over there? I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. Thanks.
So I've listened to the nurses for several years, and I am friends with some of them, and I have heard them repeatedly tell me that their volume of students that they're seeing is constantly increasing. For what they see them for more than just if they get hurt now. So I think they are stretched thin, and I think that if we were to ever have something very serious, knock on wood, happen at the school, we would want to make sure that we have a nurse at the school. So part of that answered my question when, what happens if the nurse calls in sick? What happens if the nurse wants to take a week off and we don't have anybody there? Let's say somebody gets hurt really bad going to the bus to go home, or gets hurt really bad going to the bus to come in, but our sub doesn't get there until lunchtime. And I'm glad to hear that our staff is qualified and know some basic first aid and know some things like that. But, I'm always looking at, the possibility of other things that can happen as well. So my support would be to definitely have the 2, and I wish we had money for more.
Ms. Wong? I'm good. Great. Yeah, I'm definitely in favor of these 2. I'd like to see the numbers as well to see if we might want to consider, if not this year, then in future budgets, increasing that. Yeah.
That'd be good. I'll get the numbers.
Okay, so I think I heard consensus on that, but a desire to get more data as well. Is that fair? Very good. Okay. Okay, great. All right, next up was our school board salaries increase. Dr. Bragan, do you want to summarize what we discussed earlier and where we are with that?
Yeah, as we looked at our board policy, these are the numbers we were just trying to allocate for an increase, and, I would advocate for how hard you all work. I mean, I get paid well to do this job. Most of you all got other jobs, and you come here and do this at your own time. 3 jobs, 4 jobs, I understand. Oh, so I don't know anyone that would argue against a raise, especially when you haven't had one in a period of time. From those that have a history on the board have shared that with us, so we'll wholeheartedly support that. And not to mention, you're our bosses, so we want to try to give you more money when we can. I'm only half kidding on that. But when we looked at our policy, it does say that we can't do it at this time unless we change our policy, that it has to be during a year, although it wasn't 100% clear in the language, but a year when 4 of our school board members are getting elected. And that wouldn't be this year, because we have 3, I believe, that will be up for election in November. So either we would have to change our policy to do this, or wait until next year, I think, would be the correct year. The year after.
Year after, right.
Right, and so I guess the decision for the school board would be, do you want to look at changing the policy before we put our final budget in?
Wait, can I just,
Thumbs up on that, don't you, Chair?
can I ask
All right.
Well,
Can I-
and just, I'm sorry, Ed.
just to clarify, because maybe I started with the state policy, are you saying that the one says we can only do it in the year when the 4 are up, and ours?
Ours says that, our policy says when 4 are in the year the 4
Yeah.
are elected.
Okay, so my proposal is that we move forward and we can suspend our policy until we revise our policy, but we should be following state code. I mean, irrespective of the raise itself, if there's a discrepancy, we need to close, it's up to us to close that and align with the state code on that.
That policy we were looking at earlier was enacted in 2004, is that what we saw it? I don't know. Ms. Franklin,
Yeah,
do you remember in 2004 why that board would have said that? Was there a reason?
No, I just think we need to align ourselves with what the state says,
And just,
I'm in-
and we do need a raise. That's the first time I've said that out loud. When it has first come up, it's like, yeah, we definitely do.
and just, some of the conversation we were having earlier, I've been on the board this year 20 years. We've had one raise. When I first came on the board, we made $4,800 a year. Now we make, what, $7,200 a year? And that's the one raise we've gotten, from $4,800 to $7,200. And just our meeting a couple weeks ago went from 5 o'clock till midnight. And we've had 4 meetings this month. And when we do our retreat, just for me, and I'm just speaking for me, I'll lose a day, or at least a half a day on one day and a day on another day, that I don't have paid days. And I understand it's part of the commitment, but we fight for everyone's raises all the time, and I think we need to look out for ourselves as well. And whether I'm on this board next year or any of the rest of us, we need to do what's right for all the boards in the upcoming years. And I think this would be it, to align our policy and to move forward, because our time is important. We leave our families. I leave my housework all the time, dinner on the table. But we're here when duty calls, and that's not even counting the phone calls or the emails or the extra meetings or the things we go to the schools. And so we are much in deserve. So if any of the community members think we're making a ton of money, then they are sorely mistaken.
So let me just propose an idea. So as we're going around, let's let's everybody weigh in as to whether or not you would like to consider an amendment to our policy. And we'll make sure we get that on the next agenda. But I guess it's also worth discussing the increase amount. So there's a number down here. Can the administration highlight where that number came from, just for our awareness?
Sure. It's just a rough estimate, so it brings the current, am I getting some echo? The current salary of $7,200, $9,200 for the chair brings it up to $12,000 and $14,000. So whatever number the board comes to, we'll include, but that's the estimate, 12,000 to 4,000. I know, it's a little echo here.
Mike's in.
Might just be that mic, sometimes they're janky.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Yeah, it brings it up to 12,000 and 14,000 for the chair.
Okay, so let's maybe start over. So if we have a consensus, well, let's get a consensus about whether we want to modify the policy, but let's also comment, if you want, about those numbers. Are those numbers where you want them to be?
Yeah, based on what you had said, looking at other salaries,
We're still below.
We're still below. And this amount that's in the budget, is that to institute the salary increase at the beginning of 2026? Because I think that is one of the provisions in the policy, is that you have to wait until the next calendar year before it goes into effect. So that may affect that number.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking July 1, when every other employee gets the raise, unless that's not permissible.
No, I don't think that's,
It's July 1 for board members? Okay.
I think
I mean, January 1.
yeah,
So that would, budget-wise, that would be half that, because it's only half a year.
yeah. So, yeah, in terms of the policy, because the rationale that they.
Actually, it would be, yeah, half that. It'd be from January until June 30th.
Yeah. The rationale that's in the state code makes sense to me, the 4 versus 3 and how it's written there and how I read it. So absolutely, that's an easy fix in our code. I mean, in our policy.
Ms. Franklin, anything else to add on that one?
The current salaries are $7,200 for board members and $9,200 for the chair. And this budget number is $12,000 for board members and $14,000 for the chair.
Ms. Purcell?
I'm in support of amending the policy and to make sure that we are in alignment with state code. I'm in favor of increasing the salary. I did not run for this position for the salary. However, I think anyone should be able to run for the position. And being paid a little bit more might open it up to people who might not consider it.
That's great. Dr. Roundtree?
Yeah, I'm in 100% agreement that raising it so that other people can run and help pay for their livelihood is beneficial. I'm in the same boat. I didn't run for the salary, but I appreciate the benefit that it has for income to some people. And the 12,000 is still quite low. And just to point out, the 2,000 difference from board members to the chair is the limit that we're allowed to do by state law. And that $2,000 differential in what the chair does compared to the rest of the board members the $2,000 is inconsequential. It is not paying for the additional work of the chair. So thank you, Linwood, or Mr. Hudson.
I can confirm that. Ms. Pardon?
So yes, I believe I'm the one that brought this up, I think. I think that
Yeah.
it's But, so, again, none of us seated here jumped into this because we're making so much money. We're here because we care about our students and our community, and we've got servants' hearts. And I believe that solely about each and every one of us here on the board and every other person that has served on the board before me. So we're not here to get rich, but our time has exponentially increased even just since I started, and that was 8 years ago. Mainly starting with COVID. I had about 1 or 2 good years before everything went crazy, and things have just gotten totally more time-consuming since then, which is nothing we can control, but it is up to us to meet on and discuss and things like that. So, again, to compensate for some work lost time, because just about everybody, I believe, here has another full-time job, and they have a home life with kids at home, kids not at home, kids in school, kids in college, whatever, and spouses. So it does take a lot of time away. So just for some compensation of that, I think would bring more people forward in the future that were thinking, I don't really think I can do it. I don't have that kind of time, because when I started, I didn't realize it was going to be this kind of time. And so I think that helps us just bring better people to the board and opens up a bigger pool of people that could serve if they would like to and not tie their hands.
This one.
Well, I've already made my comments, but I do have one more. When you were looking at the state and you saw that there were only a $2,000 limit, what about vice chair?
There's no increased pay for vice chair.
But is there no limitation to that? I just feel like when I first
think
got on, huh?
The limitation, I think, is 0.
But does that mean it can't?
I think it can't.
Okay. See, that's a little bit shameful, because in the beginning, vice chair really didn't do anything, just was there in case. But that's not the way it is now. Vice chair is at the meetings, at the joint meetings, at the agenda prep, and all of those things, maybe not as much as chair, but does carry extra duties. And I do feel like that's a little bit of an unfair, but I didn't know exactly what the state said.
So it says chair of the school board can be paid an additional $2,000 is what the reg says. Vice chair has the name chair in it.
Exactly.
So we may investigate whether or not that can
And I'm not
carry
saying it has
to
to
the
be
vice
the
chair.
same, but, a stipend of some sort for being vice chair to.
So I will tell you what I know, and I do know that the vice chair on the Board of Supervisors makes $1,000 more, and the chair makes $2,000
That's what I was going
more.
to suggest.
And that's been happening for as long as I can remember.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if we're allowed to do it with code, then I'd support
Yeah,
that.
and I'm not sure if our board is different, so to speak, but I do know that the vice chair on that particular board does get compensated a little more, because they do have extra duties, and they've got to be able to take over the seat of the chair for whatever reason. So, that's they've got to be ready to go, and there's preparation and work that goes into that. So I agree with Ms. Bond. I think that both seats should be compensated more than just what a normal seat. Maybe not the same, but there should be a slight difference there, because it is more work.
And that was going to be my recommendation, 1,000.
Yeah, board, I agree with everything that's been said. It sounds like this one has support, and it would be interesting if we could explore if we are allowed to do something for vice chair, because I would agree with that as well, if we're allowed. Let's get information on that.
We'll research that, and what I hear is bring back a policy at the next meeting that's aligned to the requirements from the state code.
Okay, so let's summarize. So now we've gone through these 5. So on the salary scale adjustments, we all agreed, well, we approved that one for inclusion. The dean of students, we did not approve that one. For the nurses, we approved that one, but we would like some more information about caseload. The school board salary increases, we approved that one with action to bring back the policy to amend, and also to explore an increase for vice chair. And then on the yes, absolutely right. Yep, so information on the current salary scale and the proposed new one. And then on the school nutrition program, we also approved that one for inclusion. Okay, did I get everything right so far? Okay. So now, I think it would be appropriate to open the conversation back up to the budget at large, because these were just what we talked about in the last one. If there's any other items that board members would like to discuss in the bigger budget, we can do that. I guess I would ask, if a conversation comes up about a particular topic, let's make sure we go around, get feedback on it, and a thumbs up or thumbs down, if possible, unless we need more information or whatever else, just so we can give the administration some clear guidance. Okay? So the floor is open. Any other items board members would like to address?
I have a question about the update that you got from the state about enrollment numbers, and I was just curious, like, where is it? Where's it happening? Is it across the board? Is it elementary schools? Is it one part of the county over another? Or is it kind of a little bit everywhere?
Yeah, I don't think they do demographic studies or anything like that. They do statistical analysis, and all I saw was an aggregate number that's less than the 9,200 that we used. Angie, if you can elaborate if you have more in-depth information.
It is a statistical number. It was exactly 100 less students when they did this calculation. And so for curiosity's sake, I went and took a look at all the other districts because I wanted to see, if this was not the norm. There were 2 school districts in Virginia where their numbers increased. Everyone else reduced and reduced significantly. Actually, some of them more than what we did. So it is large. When you look at the number, it's approximately, it's over $8,000 per student when you look at that average amount per student when you start making that calculation. So it's significant to the district.
And last year, we used the number 9,200 because we thought that was a conservative estimate, and their final number was a little bit higher. That's why at the end of the year last year, we had additional state aid monies. I'd rather use the number they're giving us because I do think it's closer to 9,200, the number that we should be using. But if we do that and then it comes in and their estimate is 91 and change, whatever that number is, they're going to take money from us. I'd rather it go the other way. So it is conservative, but is a risk there. And there is a couple other funding, like with the state sales tax and the local revenue, that we don't always know that number until the end of the year, which is frightening. We're already spending that money. So that was our thought process, but the calculation tool, the initial number was the 81 and change. The calculation tool came out the day we were presenting the budget last January, whatever that date was. And when we crunched the numbers the next day, what is it, 800,000 and change less or whatever?
And also, in looking, we have December numbers, so they will update that, every few months. So we take a look at that, and currently we're sitting at 9218. So, they're looking at this for next year. So we do, based on our enrollment projections, we do see a decline. I still feel like we're going to be above that, but we do want to be conservative on those numbers because we need to meet our revenue for that.
I appreciate the context. Thank you.
Related to that, so our composite, I think it's the composite index, where are we at with that? Is that, I can't remember if it's calculated every so many years or every year?
I'd have to look, I believe that's an annual calculation.
So the last time I remember us talking about that, ours had gone up, which meant we were getting less money from the state because we should be able to support students. Where are we at now?
It has been pretty level over the last, couple of years. I don't remember, I wasn't here for the discussion, when there was an increase in that, but we can certainly give you those numbers.
So I have a question, and I apologize for not reaching out earlier. It just but every budget I always ask about the property where the buses are on Radford Road. That's just something that I have a real hang-up about and feel like we need to get rid of that expense and host on our own property. So, I ask all the time, and I apologize for not, I know that, spurring it on you is not the best way to do things, but I'm just curious.
I thought Charlie Wimmer was a friend of yours. No, I'm just kidding.
That was Dana.
We've talked about
I
this.
don't know.
We've talked about this before, and, we're not ready to have an official presentation, but I want to present two things to the school board in the very near future. And one is about the operations center and that parking in the back, and working with the Director of Transportation and Ms. Bland. We have an idea and a plan that I want to present to all of you. In addition to that, I mentioned it casually when I think Ms. Franklin, someone asked me about gas prices and the diesel prices, and why didn't we put any inflationary increases in the budget, because we have a plan to do our own gases. So we're going to, early February, maybe second meeting in February, present to you all a plan that we could actually fund with the monies we currently have in our capital reserve account, some of the leftover monies from the CPS addition and the additions that were proposed for the op center that didn't take place, that got adjusted a few years ago. So ideally, we wouldn't need that moving forward.
Right, and also just a note on that, I don't want to see any buses at any schools, though. I worked long and hard to get that gone. So with that plan, even though, I'm speaking more for the operational center in that back area, not to host at any of the, schools.
So just on that too, that wouldn't be a operating budget item, that'd be a capital item. That if we did do that, that would release that money that's dedicated for the lease.
So some of the buses at school are because the driver is more convenient.
You know what I'm talking about, remember the graveyard at Christiansburg High School that I had to fight long and hard to get those buses gone. Right.
Yeah. And some of the people do actually take their buses home. It's more convenient for them to park in their
Not
neighborhood.
even talking about any of that kind of stuff.
Understood.
Go ahead and go around if that's easier. Ms. Parton, do you have any items? Go. Dr. Roundtree?
Along with the budget in the same kind of time frame, or at our next joint meeting with the Board of Supervisors, it'd be good to give them a plan of what kind of capital expenditures we have coming down the road for our buildings. So we should have some discussions on that, but the budget, I appreciate the detail in the budget and the amendments that have been made. So I'll pass it on.
Okay. Ms. Purcell?
I want to echo the sentiment that I believe was expressed by Ms. Bond, Ms. Parton, and Ms. Franklin about the funding of the school security officers, and just making sure that the brunt of the cost doesn't come from the division and certain perceptions. And I also want to echo some comments from our first presentation of this budget, just about the additional lines for special education and exactly how they're going to fit. I feel like that's data that we need.
Fair enough. There's a plan coming that we will present to the school board.
Before,
That would be our plan, either at the fourth meeting, most likely at the one on the 18th, which, as we talked about it before, we would most likely approve this. I think the final board stamp of approval would be at that 18th board meeting, unless we had one additional meeting if you needed to, because the Board of Supervisors, I believe, is February 24th, when they want us to present our formal request to them.
Yes, that's correct.
Ms. Franklin?
So, going down with some of the programs and our security officers and the fuel situation, now correct me if I'm wrong, have we actually approved the dual enrollment program? Not enrollment, language?
Dual language immersion program? No,
Approve that, or just approved to look into it, right?
just looking into it.
And the security officers, we haven't had discussion and done any approval of that. The teachers that would go along with the dual language. And then we had, there was another program that's not listed, I don't have right in front of me. Anyway, there are several things that have not been presented to us as a proposal so that we know exactly what it is and whether we even are going to approve them to be added to the budget. So until I get all the information about all the new stuff that's included in the budget that the board has not had conversation about and approved, the Southwest Virginia School for Arts, right? Until I get information about these programs and these additions to our budget, I can't vote on a budget that I don't know, and especially if the board has not approved them. So that's where I'm at with the budget at this point.
Okay. The dual language immersion program, we presented the idea and what we were looking at and what potential costs would be. We haven't surveyed, we have surveyed, but we haven't gotten the actual numbers, what that would look like. So we're in the process of having those meetings now. We talked about the 4 additional school security officers, presented the budget, what it would cost, the amount. We had the local law enforcement. I'm not sure what else you would ask me to do.
No, the board needs to discuss.
Okay, all right.
What we're gonna do with it.
Well, we could bring that back at a further meeting, and if there's more information that I need to provide, I will definitely do that, like the multiple language learners. That's kind of by code that we need that. The additional gifted and talented staff member was something that was requested from the committee. The special ed education increase for the continuing services, I understand that, and we're going to plan on having that presentation, which will be a multi-year project. The addition of the fine arts administrator and the 504 coordinators. So, okay. When we present it finally, we'll have those separate and talk about what those would be.
Yeah, I mean, I think to Ms. Franklin's point, particularly the school security officer program and the dual language immersion, right? Those are 2 new programs we presented information, right?
Yep.
But as a board, we haven't given an official, yes, we want to move forward with those, right? And so it's kind of a chicken before the egg. Do you put in the budget and we vote the budget, or we approve to do it before you fund it? So, yeah, I do agree. On those 2 in particular, I think the board needs to decide whether we want to do it or not. And then you're saying that if we approve to do it, then you've got your approval on the addition of those in the budget, right? So.
Got it.
Yeah, the fuel, I'm sorry, I know I'm going out of order. I apologize. The fuel bit, was that a separate cost increase anywhere? You said that was out of capital, right?
It was a conversation we had, actually. I think Ms. Franklin's like, hey, you're not increasing gas, and you should probably plan for that, I think. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Penny, if that wasn't you, but, and then I had said that we have another plan that we're looking at, because currently, basically, our drivers and our fleet drivers and anyone who drives the car, myself included, you get a credit card to go down to the Speedway or one of the local gas companies, and you get gas, you put your number in, you get your mileage, and you do all that, and we keep track of it. And for the bigger ones like Speedway, we do get a reduced rate, but it would be much cheaper if we had our own gas. So we have a proposal that we're not ready yet. We're going to bring to the school board for putting 4 areas around the county where we would get our own gas. And there'd be a requirement and a key for you to get your gas. But rather than going to, the local marts around town, there'd be 4 central locations, and we could buy the gas in bulk, which would be a significant savings. So that's coming soon.
Well, just to clarify, though, but
That would be a capital expenditure, not a budgetary. I'm sorry, that was your question.
and you said that earlier, I just want to make sure that I heard that right.
And the idea would be that the ongoing cost of gas would at least be the same, if not less, moving forward, that we wouldn't have to factor in
Roger.
an inflationary increase.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Franklin, did you have anything else? Okay. Dr. Guthrie.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on the question of not all of the programs, but for example, the SSOs. So what happens if we don't approve? We approve them for the budget, but as a board, we decide not to go forward with the program.
What happens to the money? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
It would be like any other funding that's not utilized at the end of the year. It would be either a spend down or would be put as a carryover fund. Like this year, for example, at the end of the year, I think our budget was 134 million, our operating budget at the end of last year. And I believe when everything was spent, all the bills were paid, all the encumbrances were moved over, right? The stuff that we bought but didn't pay for yet, we had about 800,000 left. And we put that into our reserve account for health insurance because we knew that reserve wasn't as robust as we would like. And it would be something like that, right? So if we approve anything at the end of the year, there's monies left over, we either have to spend it down, right? So we'll buy a new bus that we couldn't have afforded when they may have asked for 10 and we only could afford 8, we'll get 2 more if we have that money. And then any remaining can go in one of 2 areas. We can go into capital reserve, or we can go into our health reserve account, which is where I would dedicate any additional funds, because a year or 2 ago, it was like less than $1 million. And a robust health reserve account for a district our size is about $4 million. And we're going to talk at another point about our insurance, but we're doing a nice job and we're building that up.
Okay. Because that's one of the questions that I have is we're putting the cart before the horse, and I know that we need to get this budget in. I did look at other divisions because I was like, I feel like I need more information. And so there was one division, for instance, what they did was that they got a state grant, they put someone in the position, they brought that before the board approved, and then they built out the budget, policy, et cetera. And in terms of documentation, I was looking at some of the other, again, some of the other divisions around the state, and they did, and I'm not saying that we need to do this, but they did a full security assessment and included that as one of the recommendations after that assessment. So I agree that there needs to be a process, and like I need more. I feel like I need more information, and I don't think, looking at some of the other divisions, I don't think it's unusual to have more deliberation, more of a process, and have more information available to the board, because, I mean, we just got some information up at the state level. I was from an email. I was like, oh, let me go find out what is this, what is the description, et cetera. So that's one concern that I have about allocating money, and just making clear that just because we allocate does not mean that the board is giving approval for things that we've not approved. Yeah. The second, this is a slightly different question, but has the division, have you started to have conversations about Trump's executive order on freezes on grants? Like, have you started to, is there any assessment of the immediate impact? Because I think it's important for our community to know that some of these orders that are coming down actually affect what happens right here in this county. And so I'm wondering, do we have contingency? Is this even a conversation to have as we're building out our budget? What what would be the effect if Title IX or other federal funding for what's DEI programs hits this county?
We're in conversations with that. I have an email that's going out regarding that right now to our principals and our leadership staff. As of now, and this is the guidance we got from the BDOE as well as our organizations for the state superintendency, is right now we're in a holding pattern. Don't do anything. Nothing is getting cut today, right? And we have a webinar actually that sponsored, I think, by the DOE or the VAS organization on Thursday that I plan to attend, get more information. But right now, we don't know. So if you look at this budget and you look at the federal monies that we get we're proposing a $154 million budget-ish, about $5.2 million is federal funds. So if all of a sudden that dried up, that'd be an issue, right? I don't anticipate that happening. Half of that money goes to our IDA money, the other half is title monies. So, but to be honest with you, I don't know. I mean, this is a precarious time, and there have been conversations people have had as well regarding, deportees and immigration status of some of our students, and, what is our position on that? And, our position is, we want all our kids in our school. We're never going to keep them here. We're going to educate them. I hope and don't envision that any officer is going to come to our school with a warrant for a child. I don't envision that happening. If that happens, I'll call our attorney and find out what I can do or not do, right? I don't have the answer. It's an uncertain time, and as soon as we get more, we'll share it with everyone as best as we can. And the advice that I've gotten to date is just relax. Let's get all the facts and see where it lands first, because there could be implications, but we don't know what they'll be.
Yeah, I think it's really important for our community to know, because like even that SERVE grant,
That's one of them.
that could easily, did we get the money in July? Have we gotten all the money up front, or how is that money coming in? Like, just so, people are listening, I mean, this,
The SERVE grant is one that I was like, ooh, I don't know about that. Typically, those grants will get reimbursed, but I don't know the logistics behind the scene. You know that more than me.
That, we're required to expend the money and get the services, and then we request reimbursement. So all of the money has to be upfronted by the district. So we're currently expending the funds, but have yet to receive the reimbursement on that.
oh, so we might not get reimbursed if they decide to end that program, like not to actually fulfill that grant.
Each reimbursement has to be approved, so.
Yep.
Many of the federal funds are that way.
Yeah.
We expend the money and get reimbursed.
Right, right. So I just wanted to make it clear to people, like, this could have immediate impact right here in this community in ways that people don't realize. And they should, call congressmen if they're concerned about this. I know I placed a call.
But
Yeah, for clarity, it's a freeze on the disbursement of grant funds. So that means that grants that have already been awarded will not receive money for a period of time at least. Now, in the more than 2 hours that we've been in our meetings today, there has been a judiciary freeze on that memo from the Office of Business and Management and Budget. So there's at least a freeze on it. Hopefully, it will be completely overturned. But yeah, it is a real issue that they are talking about taking money from our school system here in the county.
And I didn't mean to derail it all, but as we're talking about budget.
Sure.
Just wanted to raise that awareness. But thank you so much for all the work you did on this.
Okay, board, any other topics? Any other budget topics, I should clarify?
So, to Ed's question, which piggybacked off mine, so if we were to approve a budget that we had not approved a program for, or whatever, and it goes to the Board of Supervisors with that in there, and then we decide we're not going to do it, it will be hell to pay. Been down that road before. Switching up what we say we're going to do that they've approved funds for. So, again, I will not approve a budget that has anything in it that this board has not approved.
I'm sorry.
It's in there.
Pull what out?
the things that weren't approved.
The things we, yeah.
Yeah.
Ms. Franklin was asking, there were some things in the original presentation that we have not approved
Right,
yet.
that's
Such
what
as-
yeah, he said. it
Such
was
as the SS,
Yeah.
the retired school security officers and the other, we didn't approve yet, that before Ms. Franklin would approve it, the board has to weigh in, and we will ask for the board's information on that before the final budget, so that when we present to the Board of Supervisors, we are saying, we're doing this. So if they give us the money, and I would agree, that would create some bad feeling there, although technically they're two separate governing bodies, but you have history and you know what that would be, right? They can't tell us what to cut, what not to cut. They can tell us you get this or you don't get it. But I understand.
Yeah, I mean, as part of this, this budgetary process, we can discuss whether or not we plan on approving the school security officer program, or why we wouldn't do that. We've had presentations on it. The same thing's true of the dual language program. The way that was looked at when it was presented. I thought that everybody was in agreement that that was something that we wanted to move forward with. Did we? Yeah, that's what I'm asking. That's what I'm wondering. Did we not have a vote on the dual language program? Was it just a thumbs up to
It
continue
was just a
looking at
thumbs
it?
up to continue to investigate, and part of that was cost, right? So,
Right.
yeah, so I mean, I think we're all in agreement, and so it's really, it's incumbent upon us and really the administration, if y'all can get that information to us.
Yeah.
Everything we need in time to do that vote.
Well, and the retired school security officers, you all asked for more information. I don't have it yet. You wanted it from Northern Virginia towns that already have it. We're getting it. So that was, I heard that was part of the conversation and the decision-making process for people that are doing it already. You know, what are they doing? How have they done that? And I'm working with law enforcement to get that information. So we'll try to do that on the 4th.
I have a question about the school security offices and the debate about it. Why wouldn't we do it? Why wouldn't we have a school security officer or a SRO in every school? I mean, I understand the point about the payment and whether the towns start pulling their SROs, so then we have to have more SSO or RSSOs. But currently, we don't have an officer in the school, and they're
Full-time.
a full-time officer in all of the schools. Yep. And there's been events where there's been a person on a campus or nearby a campus where an SRO has gone and handled the situation, and in our county, when those situations happen, you want somebody that's appropriately trained and equipped in order to go out and handle those situations. You don't want a teacher going out to handle a situation with a civilian that has a hatchet, for example. It's just not something you want happening. You want an SRO to go out, or an RSSO.
Dr. Gitcher, I think that's an
Dr. Roundtree.
incredibly, Dr. Roundtree, sorry. I think that is an entirely fair question. I guess I would ask maybe let's have that discussion based on the agenda item that we'll put hopefully on the next meeting, to actually get that vote, right? We can have that conversation, because that's.
Are these all up for vote next meeting, or are we hearing material for them and then voting on the following meeting?
I mean, we'll try to get it on the agenda, right?
Yep.
I mean, I think we've heard a lot of stuff that folks want to hear more about because it impacts the budget. We talked about the school safety officers, the dual language program, the fuel, the
Salary
discipline plan, the salary caps, the special ed program. I mean, I think we're going to have to be realistic in terms of how much we can try to cover before a budget vote. But I think that those two at least, since we have discussed them already, we have information. I think the school security officers and the dual language immersion programs, I think those are certainly realistic for us to get up on, I would hope, of the next agenda and vote up or down. Some of these other things we haven't heard anything about yet, right? You know, the administration's working on a plan, so I mean, I think we'll try our best, and it's really up to this board. However many meetings, we can add extra meetings, right? We have meetings like this. If we want to try to get that stuff in this year's budget, but we need the time, we can find the time if we want to.
Well, and that's why I was suggesting that we maybe have some discussion tonight about them, because it's only 9:30.
No, we can't, it's not on the agenda.
Not on the agenda, right?
10:30 is not too late.
Well, Dr. Gucci, please.
Try to keep us from going till midnight next time.
I was trying to call on you earlier, clearly.
Yeah.
And
I just want to make clear that I'm not against it. Yeah, I just want to make sure that's crystal clear. I'm not, by talking about procedure and getting formal approval, it's not that I'm opposed to it.
But to Ms. Franklin's point, we haven't discussed as a board and taken a vote whether we want to do it, and that's an action we need to take, and we'll absolutely do that.
They heard me.
You're keeping me busy.
Is it? It was in there somewhere?
There's no budget item for that one, is
It's
it?
not. Okay.
It's not in there. But
We do still need more information.
We do plan on presenting on the New River Valley School for the Arts and Humanities.
I would argue that maybe that one isn't quite as timely if it doesn't have budget implications, but we absolutely need to discuss it and get more information, right? Okay, board. Are there any other budget-related conversations? I'm going to pretend I didn't hear Dr. Roundtree's suggestion.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Here's my chart for norms and protocols.
Right, right.
Gets to come to 2 or 3 extra
What was that
meetings.
word?
She's okay with it.
Germaine?
Okay, so seeing no other budget topics for tonight, I adjourn this meeting at 9:34 p.m.
We jumped into that really quick.
Good job, sir. Although Derek wants to stay until midnight.
He's got problems at home.
Yeah, understood. It's funny you say that.
Come hang out with us.